Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. Welcome back for another episode of Legal Tea. Today's topic is a current trend, and on this type of episode, we dive into something going on in the current time or that I've stumbled across on the news or social media that is pertinent to my little estate and elder law world. I recently stumbled upon an article that it's of course linked in the source links for this episode, and it is titled, "More Young Adults Are Creating Wills Because of COVID-19, Inflation, Survey Says," end quote. I was intrigued because initially I was like, wait, why would inflation cause young adults to do estate planning? And we'll get to that in a few, but generally speaking, this episode will be about that article. First, why young adults are doing estate planning now more than ever. And second, what I, as an estate attorney, consider to be a really solid estate plan for young adults. So let's dive in. A survey was conducted by Caring.com, and they partnered with YouGov. They surveyed over 2,400 adults about a variety of things estate planning-wise. The primary objective of the survey really is about, one, who is doing estate planning at all, and two, why someone has decided to do estate planning or why not. Interestingly, this 2023 survey found that 3% more Americans have an estate plan in place compared just to 2022. So there was actually a rise in people doing estate planning, generally speaking, which, yay, that's awesome, right? But if we further drill into this, the survey found that 63% more, 63% more young adults specifically now have estate planning documents compared to 2020. By the way, how they define, and I'll go by their standard for sake of this episode, how they define a young adult is someone between 18 and 34 years old. So in 2 years, it jumped 63% for young adults. And if you're a numbers person, 16% of young adults had an estate plan in 2020 versus in 2023, that's now 26% have an estate plan. So that's where they're getting these numbers. And that's fantastic. But inquiring minds want to know, why the jump? Well, lucky for us, the article dives into that a little bit. One reason, like I referenced earlier, is inflation. Their survey found that 1 in 4 say that inflation, quote, has caused them to see a greater need for an estate plan, end quote. Which, to be honest, when I first read it, I was like, well, kind of like I said earlier, why would inflation, where people are concerned about spending money usually, have a positive effect of the number of people doing estate planning? I guess that's why we always have to be learning and growing, right? Because the article really helped me understand a different perspective on this. So as the article states, basically, people are thinking about and worried about their financial future and their beneficiaries' financial future. That if times are grim, that they want to do anything they can do from an estate and financial planning perspective to protect their beneficiaries' inheritance. And that makes so much sense. Now that I, read through this and say that out loud, I can totally see that. Though, by far the overwhelming response to the question of, has inflation changed your view of the importance of estate planning? The answer was no. 60% of respondents said that inflation had no impact on how they viewed the importance of estate planning. But while some felt inflation did cause them to want to do estate planning, this piece, like where most people said inflation did not sway them either way, really didn't surprise me. But the ones that did say that it impacted them and kind of how they thought through, their beneficiaries' financial future and inheritance, that makes much better sense. Another thing that the survey mentions that young adults specifically cited as to why the increase in estate planning was kind of online presence and media coverage. The survey found that 1 in 4 Americans aged 18 to 34, so that's that young adult age they've been using, were motivated by media coverage like an online article or influencer post to get a will. So 2 things on this topic. First, I can totally attest that this is true. I have a friend who actually runs a blog called 221, hi Chelsea, that she'll occasionally give my office shout outs on her social media page, like Instagram, where she has over like 30,000 followers. And we've actually gotten people that have called our office from her posts, and they've subsequently converted to paying clients to do an estate plan. So thanks, Chelsea, for the shout outs, and that's just a perfect example of what this is talking about. The second thing to mention on this topic is kind of current events that the media covers. And sadly, so sadly, some young adults even specifically referenced things like mass shootings and the coverage that they get as to a reason to get planning done. And that's so sad. I hate it so much to even say that out loud. I found all the survey results really interesting. And as an estate attorney who happily helps young adults and young families with estate planning, hearing there's a rise in young adults getting their estate planning done makes me so happy. I think where the disconnect happens is that young adults often know they should have some type of estate plan, especially young adults with kids. But they often fail to take the next step to actually get a plan done. Actually, according to the survey, 64% of Americans think having an estate plan is important, but only 34% of Americans actually have one in place. From the survey, in the last 3 years, we've seen an increase in young adults specifically that do that next step. So let's just hope it continues. I was talking to someone I met on Twitter recently. She is an estate planning attorney in Chicago. Her name is Lauren Kaplan with Kaplan Estate Law, LLC. Anyway, we were talking about, how many young families do not do estate planning. And it's likely for a few different reasons. First, there's time. They are busy. And especially with kiddos running around, time is precious. Second, they don't know what they don't know. They know they should probably have an estate plan done, but they don't know what kind of plan. They don't really know who to ask, etc. And finally, third is cost. They usually know that, you get what you pay for, right? So free online documents are probably going to be no good. And they don't want to jeopardize having bad documents. But seeing an attorney is maybe an expense that they don't really want to take on at the moment. With time and cost, I think at some point, young adults just have to proactively prioritize estate planning. Most of us are always busy, and most of us don't love paying lawyers for fun. So I guess what I mean is that young adults simply need to make the intentional choice at some point to say, I'm going to get my estate plan done, and this is what I'm going to do about it. I'm going to act on it. I really can't help you with that, with time and the money piece. But what I can help you with is maybe that second reason that the reason that some young adults don't do estate planning, which is I don't know what I don't know, that they often recognize the need to do an estate plan, but they don't know what kind of plan. Or they don't know who to work with. And I can be helpful with that one. Hence this episode. It's for you. So when I think of young adults, I'm often reminded from an estate planning perspective of the very informal phrase, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid, right? I hope you've heard of that saying before and you're not offended. Anyway, getting something in place is better than nothing. It's, my best metaphor that I often use is it's kind of like car shopping. So there are Honda Civics. They're good cars. They're faithful. They get us from point A to point B. And there are Corvettes. Those are good cars. They're faithful. They get us from point A to point B, but they're a little fancier than the Civic, right? And if you pick the Civic, that's fine. And if you pick the Corvette, that's fine too. It just depends on how much you're wanting to spend. And that's a great metaphor for estate planning, honestly. When I think of adults, young adults specifically, I primarily think of a really basic plan consisting of a healthcare representative, a healthcare power of attorney with the advanced directives in it, second, a financial power of attorney, and third, a last will and testament. That's my Honda Civic plan. It's better than having no car, right? But it's still a dang good car. And compare that to, those same 3 documents and adding on a revocable living trust. That's going to be my Corvette package. So let's dive into both. The biggest difference between these packages, between these plans, is a last will and testament versus a revocable living trust. I know. So many people hear the word trust and they're like, oh my gosh, what? I don't think I have enough money for a trust. Rather than looking at it from money, like how much money you have, you really need to look at it from a what am I trying to accomplish? What is my goal standpoint? With a will, to make the terms of the will come to life is going to require a court process called probate, which is a process that will take a little extra time, money to get through after you pass away. I bring this up because especially young adults with kids, I see them want to provide a really specific distribution pattern for their kids if they, like the parents, were to pass away. And what I mean by that is I see them want to do something like, my kids get X percent at 18, Y percent at 25, Z percent at 30, or some type of setup like that. To make that happen means we need assets actually flowing through the will, which, like I just said, a will is going to have to be taken through the probate court process. This leads me to why some young adults and young families end up doing like the Corvette package. Those same basic documents plus adding on that revocable living trust is that Corvette package. I see individuals and families do this type of plan usually to still ensure like that specific distribution pattern and plan happens. So like when I was talking about, inheriting at 18, 25, 30 in that example. So they usually will do this kind of Corvette package if it's to ensure that plan distribution pattern kicks in and to avoid the probate court process. So trusts, so long as your assets are governed by the trust, will avoid the probate court process. What I mean by the piece about so long as your assets are governed by the trust is a very important process called trust funding. Funding is the process of changing title and ownership of assets, so say like your house, to the name of the trust, and changing beneficiaries like brokerage accounts, life insurance, that sort of stuff, to be the trust. What that accomplishes is that if something happens to you, those assets are either already in the trust or they dump into the trust at your passing. And so long as the trust is governing, those assets are going to pass free of the probate court process. So that's what I mean by this whole, Honda Civic versus Corvette thing. Is either better than the other? I'm not sure how I would answer that, honestly. If someone is coming to a conversation about estate planning, kind of with the mindset of, I just want to do something basic and cost effective, then maybe the basic will plan, the will package, the Honda Civic, is most appropriate. Or if someone comes to the conversation with the mindset of, I want to do estate planning, I want to do the absolute best package that I can possibly do to help my family and or kids, even if that means spending more than doing just the will, then maybe the trust package, the Corvette, is better for them. It's really up to them, and honestly, either is better than nothing. Alrighty, I am close to out of time, friends, so let's wrap this episode up. Next week's topic is on estate planning of the rich and famous. And on that episode, we're going to dive into what happened estate-wise following the passing of the super well-known track star, Florence Griffith Joyner. Her estate taught many, that after doing your estate plan, you kind of need to set up your executor for success. And that means they need to know where your estate planning documents are. So we will dive into that next Tuesday, Legal Tea listeners, and I will talk to you then, and please stay well.